Welcome to Valley Fever Voices podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Lisa Shubitz. Dr. Shubitz is a veterinarian and research scientist at the Valley Fever Center for Excellence. Her research focuses on developing a vaccine for valley fever, studying the epidemiology of the disease in dogs, the ecological distribution of the fungus in southern Arizona, and interactions between the host, both animal and human, and the fungus that causes valley fever using animal models. She's been recognized as a woman of impact at the University of Arizona for her contributions to the development of the valley fever vaccine and for being a vital part of the Valley Fever Center for Excellence for more than 25 years. Dr. Shubitz also sees valley fever patients with complicated infections at Tucson Veterinary Specialists. Welcome, Dr. Shubitz. I'm so glad we finally got to get together. I've been excited to sit down and talk with you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. What an honor to be asked to chat with you this morning.
Thanks, Dr. Shubitz. So with you being involved in the research with the valley fever vaccine, I think that's what everybody wants to know about. But we can get into the details of it, and because you're in the trenches doing the research with the little mice and stuff, which is awesome for a veterinarian. That would be what I would want to do too, is work with the little animals.
Well, they don't bite as hard as a dog, so it's okay. So mice are pretty crucial to biomedical research that ultimately benefits humans and animals. And it's one thing that I've really enjoyed about working on valley fever is the work we do benefits both humans and animals. And as probably almost everybody who's listening to this podcast knows, the impact on dogs is great, like it is on people. In fact, probably more dogs get sick and require treatment than people, and the treatments last for a long time, and there's a lot of angst and a great deal of expense surrounding the treatment of valley fever in dogs. And
well, yeah, you did that study on the
yes,
cost analysis.
It costs dog owners in the 6 endemic states, which is California, Arizona, Texas, Nevada, Utah, and New Mexico, about $100 million a year to take care of them. And that's probably an underestimate because we were pretty conservative and only talked about the cost of treating uncomplicated. We only quantified the cost of treating uncomplicated cases that have pneumonia and get better on a pretty routine schedule, and not the cases that are difficult. They end up at the ER, they need advanced diagnostics, and they may cost them
it's tough.
10 or it's tough for pet parents.
Yeah, and emotionally, it's tough for pet parents.
Very emotional.
In fact, I just talked to a pet parent with a dog with valley fever, and emotionally, she's almost ready to give up her dog because she can't handle the expense and the emotional issues that go with that.
Yeah, it's very hard, really hard. And it's also not very easy to quantify, but we do know that in Arizona, which is where about 95% of the dogs with valley fever live, that relinquishment of pets because of valley fever occurs, and people they're sad, they're embarrassed, they don't want to do it, and they often don't even report that the animal has valley fever, but they literally cannot afford the cost of this disease. So anything we can do that would keep pets in homes and not put their owners in a position where they've got to decide whether they're going to buy fluconazole or groceries,
right,
would be good. Which brings us back to our vaccine. And I have worked on vaccines. In fact, I got into valley fever research because Dr. Galgiani, who was interviewed on a previous podcast, came to the Department of Veterinary Science looking for someone who could do mouse model work to test a vaccine material that he was working on. So I started this journey in 1998 and
Wow.
learned a ton about valley fever. And we started very slowly with a protein vaccine and an adjuvant that didn't work as well. And this evolved over the years to a multivalent protein vaccine, different fancier adjuvants that are less toxic to humans was the objective of that particular vaccine. And the project grew. And then in 2000, I don't know, maybe 10, one of our collaborators had the brilliant idea to remove a gigantic gene from the valley fever fungus. And it's the same gene as one that regulates virulence in corn fungus pathogens. And it was amazing. I couldn't believe it. It made knocking the gene out made this valley fever strain we use in the lab that will kill mice in 2 weeks, almost any strain of mice, suddenly didn't kill them at all. And when we looked in their lungs, we couldn't even find it. So this was amazing. And the next question was, well, does it vaccinate them? It doesn't kill them, but if we gave it to them, would they become immune? And it turned out to be very efficacious at preventing death in the mice too. And these again, the mice would be dead in 2 weeks, and the mice would live indefinitely with the vaccine. The longest we ever performed the study, because the tests cost a lot of money, was 6 months. And in 6 months, we had no deaths, 0 deaths, and half the animals didn't have any evidence of valley fever in their lungs when we put them
Wow.
to
Well, that's
sleep.
like 25% of their lifespan. So that's a 6-month mouse test is a long test for a mouse.
It is a long
And so
test.
you're vaccinating them and then exposing them to the fungus.
Yep.
And they survive.
They all survived. It was 100% survival.
Wow.
I really didn't, it exceeded my expectations. Let's put it that way. So then we didn't really have resources to go to the next steps with the vaccine, but naturally we'd been talking about a vaccine for dogs and a vaccine for humans. And the other thing about the vaccine is it's a really simple vaccine, and this is why dogs came up again, is a lot of the vaccines that are being developed now are exceedingly expensive to develop and produce. And this vaccine involves injecting spores of the fungus, which are not very expensive to grow. And they
grow like
disappear from
crazy.
the animal. And so it's like, well, this vaccine is probably inexpensive enough that we realistically could talk about an affordable dog vaccine.
Nice. And so if it works in dogs,
and then the conversation was, yeah. So
yeah,
then the
then it's going
conversation
to be
was, well, if we could prove concept in the dogs and get a dog vaccine, this might really help it go into a human vaccine. And that is the path we have taken. But I want to tell a really cool story about how the vaccine even got to the point of getting enough funding to get it here. And we didn't have enough money to do the preliminary data research to apply for an NIH grant. But we get donations to the Valley Fever Center, and I squirrel them away. I don't just spend all these donations. I write a protocol. I figure out something that's a good project that has meaning to clinically improving the life of animals with valley fever. I have other experts review these things to make sure that our science is on track. We've included the right statistics. and it's powered well enough to make sense of the results. And so I don't waste the money that's donated here. And we didn't have enough donor money at the time. And I was like, well, maybe we can try crowdfunding. Other people crowdfund. And we talked to the university and they said, sure, you can. So we did a crowdfunding thing and got about $10,000 that way. And then a local person whose family is from Mesa, they're long-term Arizonans. And her home is, well, at that time it was in Wilcox. She currently lives in Tucson. And she also bred dogs. And she wrote to me privately and said, tell me more about your research. I'm interested in this, but I don't want to go through the crowdfunding site because they skim a little off the top and I'd rather give it all. So I wrote her a page of what the objectives were, and she gave us a lot of money over the next 18 months. And with the $10,000, so we had $40,000. And that allowed us to do a flurry of mouse studies that prepared the data that we needed to apply for the NIH grant. And the NIH grant that we were awarded in 2017 was to create a dog vaccine that was ready for commercialization as a stepping stone to a human vaccine. And it was a $4.6 million grant. We achieved every single objective we said we would meet for the grant, and we had something ready to go. Now, ready to go isn't quite in a bottle because the USDA requires that there's a commercial partner. That was actually we had to have a commercial partner to even be eligible for the grant. Someone who could take this into putting a vaccine in a bottle and putting it on a shelf in a veterinary clinic. And that's been a very rocky ride, not because of science things as much as a scientist working in academia, I had zero concept of what it really takes on the regulatory and business end of things to go from this amazing product that you've created that's good, it's a good thing, but to actually get that to where it helps people is not trivial.
Yeah, that's a big undertaking.
It's huge and it's expensive and it's complicated, and we're not going to go into the details of what it takes to make that happen, but it was a very eye-opening experience for me as a scientist and a veterinarian. And it's a little bit frustrating to have something that works and it's still not available, but it's going to be available. It takes the time it takes to get this done, to get it done right, to make sure it's safe and get it into veterinary practices. But I do believe that based on the study that we ran in the course of the grant, that this will be life-changing for dogs in Arizona in particular, but people who come here with their dogs and, go back home to Minnesota and they die because no one knows what it is. I think it has a lot of utility. And even if they got sick, I think it would be so much less expensive to treat them for a mild disease than to treat them for the disastrous,
Do you think
kinds
the
of things.
vaccine, if they're vaccinated and they get exposed to a lot of spores and get the early infection, if they actually get sick, does the vaccine reduce the severity of the symptoms then?
We don't have any way to measure that, but except that the challenge that we were required to do was a pretty stringent challenge and probably higher than your average dog would experience in the real world. And so I'm optimistic that the bulk of dogs would be very well protected and might even have zero clinical signs associated with a natural infection. But I also think it's important to understand that one of my favorite sayings is life is a bell-shaped curve. And what that means is that, most dogs are going to be in the middle. They'll get the vaccine. They won't have any adverse effects to it, and they'll be well protected from the strains they encounter in the environment. But life's not pretty. And so some dogs may encounter strains that are not protected against as well by the vaccine. And there's with the vaccine we have currently, there's no way to address that differently. It's not like viral vaccines where you just go manufacture a new piece of RNA and stick it in something. This is more complicated than that. Some dogs may have an adverse reaction to it. Everybody's an individual. And I would like to see 0, but I don't think that's real. And some dogs may fail to respond to it appropriately. They don't have an immune system that can do a good job with it. Those dogs might also be at risk of getting the worst kind of disease, but there are certainly no studies to support that. So I think that in the big picture, the valley fever vaccine will really help dogs. And I expect there to be a few bumps in the road and some failures. And also there will be a learning curve as to how to use it, such as, does it require boosting on a regular basis? The USDA requires that you put something on the label. It'll be recommended for reboosting annually, but in reality, until we start to use the vaccine in the world, we don't know necessarily for sure if it will require an annual booster, or it might be more like our distemper parvo vaccines, where for most dogs, they only require a booster every 3 years. So there's going to be some learning about how to use the vaccine, because it's far too expensive to try to do all those studies in a laboratory.
Has it gone to the
dogs at BSL-3?
Have you studied it in groups of research dogs yet, or is it just in the mouse?
No, it's been in dogs. And we did a vaccine challenge efficacy study and showed that it was extremely effective at preventing any clinical signs of valley fever, titers, lung x-rays.
Nice.
And we had 18 dogs. And I think
were they client-owned dogs, or were they people's parents' dogs, or were they research?
No. The USDA requires that you use purpose-bred dogs for this work. It is not an option, because my original idea back when I was really naive, I guess, I didn't know anything about the rules, was that you could run this like a human study, like a phase 3 human study, and you give a bunch of dogs placebo and you give a bunch of dogs the vaccine, and measure how much valley fever they get over the course of a year or two. And they said, no, that isn't how it works. You need to create a model of the infection in the dog, the target species, and you have to vaccinate them and you have to infect them. So that was horrible and amazing all at the same time. I mean, who wants to make dogs sick?
Yeah.
But in fact, the dogs that got two doses of vaccine, a primary and a booster, none of them got sick.
Nice.
And the controls were all they weren't sick. Like, actually, we had maybe 2 dogs in the whole study that an owner would have taken it to the veterinarian. But when we x-rayed their lungs, they had pretty significant amounts of evidence of infection. And so the study was very successful at showing that our vaccine was really efficacious at preventing lung valley fever. And the study only lasted 2 months, which I was sad about, because I wanted to know, since we had to do this study anyways, whether it also prevents some of the other complications of valley fever, such as dissemination.
Yeah.
And it would have been really nice to know that. And I guess we could try to make the assumption that it protects them from dissemination. But in reality, I don't think we're going to know that until the vaccine is deployed in real dogs and you start to find out whether, yeah, they're not getting pneumonia, but they're coming in with bone lesions. Kind of like
Wow.
the,
Yeah. So we don't know until we vaccinate a lot of dogs and follow them for a lot of years and
yeah,
keep in contact with the veterinarians who those are their patients to
right.
know what's working and what's not working.
Well, and actually, we've got a fabulous system at the university that if you enroll these dogs in a red cap study, this is a HIPAA compliant database and they can be set up to capture this data almost automatically. You can, it will send out your surveys at your specified time point and owners can self-report, you know, every 6 months or every year they get a red cap survey, you know, has your dog had valley fever? No. You know, did it get a bone lesion? No, or yes. You know, and this is a way to capture vast amounts of data over long periods of time. And it's not tied to whether or not Mrs. White decided to go to a different veterinarian or move to New York.
Oh, so are you going to send out surveys like do vaccines on dogs in the community and then send out surveys to the pet parents?
Well, I think that's how it should be done, but I will
Yeah.
probably not be in control of that kind of what they call post-approval monitoring. And the FDA does certain kinds of post-approval monitoring, but I think that it behooves the company itself to engage in more post-approval monitoring, you know, right from the get-go to find out about efficacy, because otherwise we may lose this in the course of time. We may not be able to see it if we don't try to make an effort to capture it. And I think
Yeah.
enrolling them into an automated survey tool, which almost all people can do, we could lose some, there could be some demographic losses of data, you know, because people, certain populations may not have access to the electronic stuff. But I think we would capture, I would bet in our current society, 80 or 90%, if we could put them on an automatic electronic survey to ask them about adverse effects, whether or not they've had valley fever, whether it's been boosted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you're
where do
probably
you
going to need
live
more
now?
funding. You're going to need more funding for this.
We would need more funding, but I'll tell you what, we need a way less funding for that project than other ways to try to capture the data, especially
Yeah.
through private veterinarians, because they're very busy.
Right. I can post the information for donations and being a sponsor for the Valley Fever Center for Excellence for Research. And you can actually let them know that you want your money to go to dog research or the animal side.
We actually have that set up already on our website. If you went directly to the Valley Fever Center for Excellence website, there's a button on the top right that says donate, or you can go to the dog page and read all the cool information about valley fever in animals, most of which is dogs, but it also covers cats and some of our other species. I'd like to make a little plug for some of our other species. Llamas and alpacas suffer terribly from this disease. It's very deadly in them, and they don't show very many clinical signs, so they often have very advanced disease by the time that you can figure out they have it. And consequently, even with therapy, many of these animals die. And, you know, owners want to know what to
Get
do
the
about it. I
diagnosis
usually,
after they've died. A lot of them, like, do they die and then you figure out it was valley fever?
that happens often. I've seen some
Yeah.
really horrible necropsy reports because I mine those things out of the Arizona Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory associated with the university. And I've read them all, and they're so widely The valley fever is everywhere in these poor animals.
Wow.
And you kind of wonder why they hadn't died already when you read them. Um,
We need to get
but
the vaccine for them.
I'll talk about that in just a minute. But the way to donate is to spend your money on studies that help animals is to go to the donate page and select Companion Care Fund. And a lot of the money goes towards dogs and dog research because just financially and numerically, dogs constitute the biggest number of animals that are affected by valley fever, and in a clinically important way. But cats can get sick, and they may be really sick at the time of diagnosis because they're kind of like the llamas and alpacas. They don't really let you know they're sick until they're really sick, and then they can be difficult to treat. The llamas and alpacas have a terrible time with it, and also our zoos within the endemic area. And there are we have 4 or 5 in Pima, Pinal, and Maricopa County. And there are several up and down California besides their main zoos. Some of the smaller towns within the Central Valley area, like Kern, Tulare, all the way up to as far as Sacramento, have small zoos, or some of them have sanctuaries for wild animals. And all of these places have difficulty with the valley fever in their animals, and these places would desperately like to have this vaccine. Our zoos spend millions of taxpayer dollars treating our excellent zoo animals for valley fever, and they do a great job. But it would be nice if the animals just didn't have to get sick at all.
Yeah, because it affects all mammals, including the marine mammals.
It does. It does affect marine mammals up and down the coast of California. And those, obviously, I don't think we're going to be vaccinating, but the ones that end up in our, in our exhibits deserve to be treated. They deserve to be vaccinated. They are treated if they discover it, but it would be nice if we could prevent it. And we haven't really seen a difference in efficacy. This is one of the few times where I'm aware that giving a mouse the same dose as a dog actually prevents disease just as effectively. So
Wow.
It's really about the immune response to these spores, and I don't think it actually takes very many of the spores for us to generate a good immune response to it. Yeah.
So if the vaccine is tested in mice and then dogs and then goes to people, it potentially can be used in all the mammals, the zoo animals, because the vaccine is not species specific, it doesn't sound like.
It is not species specific, and it's one of the really nice things about it. And in fact, Anavive Life Sciences, and they're a Long Beach, California company, is working on, because licensing is so expensive and it is species specific, they are working on emergency use authorization to give the vaccination to zoo animals in Arizona and California. These are the 2 places that probably need it the most, because it isn't likely to be licensed. I think people will probably try to use it off label, meaning it's not labeled for cats or alpacas, but I could certainly see veterinarians reasonably and safely using this vaccine to prevent disease in some of these other animals, because I don't see it ever being licensed for a veterinary species beyond the dog, but I also think it will be efficacious in other animals.
That's incredible. I don't know of any other vaccine that you could cross species like that so easily.
Rabies.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Well, the legal issues associated with cross species and rabies, but they're not necessarily related to efficacy.
Yeah.
But and rabies is kind of like valley fever too. It doesn't really care what you are.
Yeah, that's true.
So
That
but
disease
yeah,
is everywhere.
I think it's really cool. It's been
Wow.
fun. And the lowly mouse has played a completely outsized role in helping us try to get new antifungal treatments are also a big deal, and an efficacious vaccine to help lots and lots of dogs and people to not become sick with this disease. So
Yep. Big shout
we
out to the
cheer
little
them.
mice. Yep.
Yep,
All the little mice that are helping us advance medicine and treatment of or prevention of valley fever.
they are. They're special. We actually enjoy them and take very good care of them and
I'm very happy for that.
respect them and everything that they give to us to make our lives better.
That's awesome. That's so nice to hear from a veterinarian that care about all the little critters that you're working with. Now you have something coming up in July at a loyal companion,
Yes,
July
Kate
13th.
Titus. So the Kate Titus, a loyal companions owner and innovator, asked me early in 2025 if I would give a valley fever, a general audience valley fever talk at Loyal Companion, and it was apparently very well received. The room
Yep,
doesn't hold very
I
many
watched it.
people, but there was a gigantic online presence from what I was told.
Yep, yep, I was
And
one of them.
so she was interested in trying to do a follow-up on that as to how physical therapy may help dogs with valley fever. And there's actually a human tie into this too. So people get terrible, terrible fatigue from valley fever that can last months. Even when they're getting better, they just continue to feel so tired all the time. And Dr. Galdiani actually recommends physical therapy for his patients to help them recondition their airways, get their muscles moving again. And he said it's really beneficial. So Kate was kicking this around, and also we see dogs that have, particularly dogs that end up with neurological manifestations of disease, which means they have gotten it into their brain and it's causing falling, circling kinds of problems, or it's in their vertebrae and they have lost some neurological function to their legs. And it's also painful. They're really painful. So as it starts to heal, the pain we can often get under control, but sometimes these dogs are left with some deficit and weakness, or they've been down so long and haven't been able to move that they've got a lot of rebuilding to do. So we're going to talk about how physical therapy might possibly benefit some dogs that have bad valley fever, or some bad consequences of valley fever. And it's going to be pretty conversational like this. It's not going to be a slide presentation so much like it was last time. But we're going to talk back and forth about the valley fever and how, what kind of physical therapy might help the dogs. And I think it'll be a really fun talk.
That's
And that's on
exciting.
the 13th.
I'm excited to see that. Because physical therapy and some of the manual therapies like massage and acupressure and acupuncture can improve the immune system. So you're boosting the immune system with the mobility, with the physical therapy and the manual therapies, and that can help them get over the valley fever and get their energy back.
Yeah, I agree. So
it's a huge thing. Good for you. Oh, I'm so excited to see that. And yeah, I know Kate Titus also I've worked with her with some of my patients, and she does wonderful work. So that's a Loyal Companion is a fabulous place. And think I will put that link in our show notes. So I'll put the link to the research sponsorship in there for the Valley Fever Center for Excellence, and I'll put a Loyal Companions information. And if you have the information on that particular July 13th
It's
function, I'll
July
put that in there too.
13th. Yes, let me just shift the page on my calendar.
So is it in person at a Loyal Companion?
Yes, I think
And
it's
then also you're going to live stream it?
that is what she is going to do. Yes. And I think it is at 1 o'clock like it was last
Okay.
time, but they
All
might
right.
have to check the website to
Okay.
verify.
I'll check and I'll post that.
time. And it
Well,
should
it's been
75 minutes like we had last time. So we'll chat for about an hour and leave 15 or 20 minutes for people's questions that they'd like to ask. And this will be really physical therapy focused and not so Valley Fever focused. But I think it gives people something to think about when their dogs are just sort of continuing to drag or need assistance or need reconditioning or things like that. It's something to think about, and Kate does a great job. And I have to say that my dog's been in rehab with her for several months, and she really likes going there.
Yeah, it's a nice place. It's a fun place. Well, thank you for sitting down and talking with me today. This has been just wonderful. I always learn some nice things.
Talk about it. It's great to have a place to talk about it and let people know what we're doing and how it's going to hopefully benefit them soon. I have no can't say how long it's going to take, but I do think this is real. It's going to happen. And
I heard maybe this year at the 69th annual Valley Fever study group, I think they said hopefully this year.
I've been saying that for about 3 or 4 years now, so I'm just tell people it's still on track. I just don't know how long it's going to take. So
that red tape.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. You have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll talk again because this is fun stuff.
Okay, right. I'm sure we can come up with some more topics to talk about.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening.